Hello folks, David here. It's another video. I'll do the intro as quick as I can because it's probably going to be quite long and waffly. Something important has come up. In fact, it's so important that the video for this build is on hold because I've got to get this one done. Right, so we're going to be talking about the Big Bot Bash. What is that, you say? Ha! Well, I shall answer. For the last 2 years, a gentleman by the name of Bill, from Bill Making Stuff, I'll leave a link for his YouTube channel down below, has done a collaboration with a number of other crafters, model makers all around the world. Basically, what happens is he has supplied a random generator and you roll some d20s. I'll show you a picture of it here, and as you can see there are 6 categories, and depending on what you roll that gives you a sort of aspect to incorporate into your model. Now the cool thing about this collab is basically anybody can join in. However, I only found out about it, well, 3 days ago as of filming this, so I am already late to the party, which means I need to get a shift on. Why do I want to join in? Well, personally, love a big mech. However, if I go back about a dozen years, this big mech was the very first scratch build I ever did, and looking at it, not the best. There's certainly stuff that I have learned that could be added to this, but I am still quite proud of that little fella. But I need another one. Now obviously I would like a playable piece, so it's not going to be a sort of display model. Some of the possibilities that can come up in those categories, I'll be perfectly honest, are real stinkers. If I roll really lucky, hey, I might even be able to get round to doing something like a Warhammer Titan for me Imperial forces. If it's a bit more weird, well, I mean, the wife needs a Ork Stompa or something like that, just to round out her heavies. If it's really weird, maybe it's Chaos. I've got Chaos forces. If it's that bad, hey, I can always have it as a mad creation of an inventor for one of my superhero games. I can't lose realistically, but let's get some dice rolls and hope that things turn out well. So unfortunately I'm having to do a voiceover because I swapped the little camera and the microphone on that one's fritzing out. Alright, time for the first roll. And that is a 4, which gives us Should It Be Leaking? Rolling for the head now, and a 16 gives us Bad Breath. Onto the arms, a roll of 3 gives us Extras. For the hands, we get a 5, which is Kaboom. Oh, that's a good one. Legs, 4, Tank Tracks. Oh. Overall flavour, 19, Killing Machine. Yeah, I can work with that. Alright, admittedly, it was a bit of a mixed bag, but I actually got quite lucky. Now, I've had a good chance to have a think about it. And I'll be perfectly honest, the big spanner in the works was those tank tracks. And I don't know whether or not it is because I am stuck doing another small walker for Chaos Forces and I'm losing the will to live with all of that red and brass. But I can recall back from my epic Titan playing days that there were some big treaded Chaos War machines. Here's a picture, I can't remember the name of it. It's a Khorne Lord of Skulls or Lord of War, something silly like that. And as you can see, Centaur style, treads on the bottom, big guns, nasty mask. Yeah, it kind of all fit. But, yeah, I can't draw myself to do that. However, seeing as how I was going old hammer already, I thought back a little bit further and I remembered one of my favourite comic book characters. This is him. This is Hammerstein. Old Hammer. See? Get it? Anyway, if you have a look at his feet, he's got tank tracks on them, but it's just normal feet. So, if I've got any kind of tank track, I can stick it to the feet. There we go. And I can do just any kind of normal mech. And when you have a look down at the rest of the stuff that I got, Leaking, Extras, Kaboom, Killing Machine, it's Stompa time. Let's get to it. Alright, a big part of these builds seems to be scavenging for bits, and I've already dragged some stuff out. Excuse the mess on the workbench, as I say, I was in the middle of doing another project. But we need to get on with this. Right, checklist. Body. Should it be leaking? Well, to my mind, that is more of a sort of decoration job at the end. But since I know it's a Gargant, this is the bag of big stuff. Let's see what we've got. All right. Now, 2 square. Oh. And I've got more of these around. Maybe I can use them for legs. Huh. Pudding balls. Right. Hang on, let's pop that to the side. No, I need something a bit bigger than that for a head. Paper stirring cup? I'll have a think about that. I mean, that's a possibility. Right, now, because it is a scale model, I do need to do a quick height check. And if I've got my maths right, I need it round about 20 centimetres high. What's that? 24. That's not bad. Right, what's next on the list? Head, bad breath. Ha! Well, I mean, you mount any kind of weapon in the face and that's going to be bad breath. I think, however, because dragons have got a brilliant breath weapon in terms of a flamethrower, that's what I'm going to stick in the front. Right, arms and hands. Extras. What? Loads of arms? Loads of things on the arms? Yeah, we can certainly do that with the orks. But I found a nice big gun for our kaboom, which is the hands part. And let's face it, with the amount of weapons that's going to be on this thing, most of it's going to go kaboom. Found those in the bits box. They'll probably do something for Gribblies, or maybe it's a different project, I don't know. Go back to the body for the moment. Now, yeah, unfortunately we do suffer from asthma quite badly in this household. But Ork machines have always got big engines with big exhausts on. And that kind of looks Gargant, Stompa size exhausts. Now, legs, tank tracks, and large amounts of kaboom is in this. Now, this is one of my favourite go-to items. You know, the cheap kids' toys. What a mess. Right, okay, brilliant. Loads of small vehicles with tracks. So that's feet. Oh, another one of those guns. Oh, even bigger gun. Right, I need to have a sort through this and separate out large amounts of weaponry. Right, I've been a busy lad. Loads of weapons here, so we've got a nice assortment. There's also these aeroplanes, and it's possible I can, you know, maybe snip rockets off because it does have a rocket launcher. So that is a thing as well. But the really good thing that I found are these ammo gun belts, and it has allowed me to make a new tool. Now basically I've just got a lolly stick and used super glue and baking soda and glued one of those on, because then what it means is, because orks have got large amounts of riveting work on them, I can just do that, smack it with a hammer, and there are huge amounts of rivets done in one go, and that is certainly going to save the ache on my wrists, which I experienced back when I was doing the ork tanks. What else have I found? What also happened, and this is something new for this channel, while I was busy sorting out the first couple of odds and ends, these arrived. Now, these are resin moulds. Remember, the rules do say no 3D printing, but pouring resin is, well, it's not against it. And the wife has been getting into far more resin pouring as part of her hobby line. And, you know, there's the possibility that just an actual skull, obviously I'd have to convert it to make it a bit more orky, but I might pour one of those just to see what it looks like. But I do need to get a crack on and start crafting. So let's have the turrets off these. Now, these are old knockoff Bionicle feet. And yeah, they will fit on there. But you know what, seeing as how that is the only set of those that I've got left, I may actually keep hold of those in case we need a second Stomper, or a Mech Boy Stomper. So I want something to build up the top of those feet, and I thought that a spoon would do it. You know, yeah, that's about the right size. Okay, we're starting feet first. I will get some riveting done, get this cleaned up, and get the feet done. One pair of feet done. Here's a closer photo so you can see what I've done. Just a wee bit of trim around the edges, plus the feet tops on, whatever you call a foot top. I'm not medical. And now I want to start sizing up so that I can do some cutouts for the body. Now I'm going to take that lip off entirely and get some sort of inserts up, because that's the way it seems to do. So I'll get that cut out and we'll do a proper size up for the sort of internal legs. Alright, that's been cut out, bottom's been trimmed off, and I've given the whole surface a decent sand because these plastic containers are an absolute swine to actually hold glue onto. Bill swears by actually sort of blowtorching the surface as well, but unfortunately I don't have one of those, so sanding is going to have to do it. Now, one thing I have noticed by taking that lip off, it is an awful lot more squidgy, so I am going to have to do some internal bracing on the inside of that, just so that it doesn't sort of collapse under its own weight or bits fall off as you're handling it and squidging it and things like that. However, the big bit of infrastructure still to do, or the large bit for this bottom section, are those exhausts. And what I have already done is marked out on here where I want some holes to be, just to give that a little bit of character. Now, kids, don't try this by yourself, get an adult to do this for you. I am lighting a candle so that I have a little bit of a heat source, and this is a metal skewer, and whenever I am sort of drilling into plastic, I always like to make a pilot hole, but because plastic is, you know, meltable, rather than using something like a soldering iron where it would just kill the soldering iron, I heat up the prong of this, and then that just starts off the hole so that my Dremel or drill bit is not going to slip. So I will get on with doing both of these, and I'll see you in a little second. Situation update time, and the foot and leg assemblies are pretty much done. I've added some piping on there just to give it a bit of height, a few cables, a bit of sprue just to give it a bit more interest. Not that you're going to see a whole lot of that because most of it is going to be under the skirt. With regard to the body, packed it out with some foam and lots of hot glue just to stop that squidginess, so that's now quite rigid, and obviously that foam has got a couple of holes in, so that's where the legs are going to go into. Now, I have also around the back added the first of the armour plates to it, and I've got a couple of screws sitting proud there because that is where the exhausts can just hang off, and as you can see it's already a wee bit more stable like that, so they'll just hang on there. Obviously they'll be glued. There's not a great deal more to be done to that body apart from basically coating it in armour plating, so I will do that off camera because it's, well, not going to make a very good video. And I have already done all of the holes on those exhausts. Now eventually I'm going to pack that out with some foam. That is going to sit a little bit more proud because that end looks more interesting, and then we'll have the end of the exhaust sticking on top like that. What else has been occurring? Okay, we are now going to be turning our attention up to the top half, and for the past couple of days the very first skull mould has been sitting, curing. Let's see what this looks like. Well, that is a very pretty skull. Not perfect, we probably used the wrong kind of resin, but for my purposes it is certainly skull shaped enough, and I think I am definitely going to have a go at using that for the head. Let's just dry everything sort of together. Yeah, by the time I've orkified that up, that's going to look quite imposing. I'll give that a shot, and if not, then I can always fall back on a more mechanical one. So the head needs to be orkied up. There's going to be lots of thin riveting going around there. Obviously it needs orky eyes on it, and I need to do something about the upper body. You always hear crafters that are new to the hobby saying, what can I use a toilet roll for? I've got absolutely loads of them. Well, you can use them to make parts of an Ork Stompa head. Another thing which is useful, and an awful lot of the other crafters I've seen have actually got sort of small half beads instead of this, but these are red lentils and they do make excellent rivets, especially for large scale stuff like that, and it has the added bonus that you can make a dal curry with it at the end. I tell you what, this video is going to be an epic bigger than Ben-Hur. It's definitely going to be a build long and hard like the Dragon Lair one was. However, here is a quick update on where I am at. Obviously, we know that the feet and legs are done. The sub-assembly for the exhausts has also been done. Here's a couple of pics of them in progress. Like I said I was going to do, I've reversed the little cartridge bottles, packed it out with some foam on the inside, added a toothpaste tube cap and then just surrounded it in card, and they can be put to one side along with the legs. The head is also done. Here's a close-up of that one, and Scratchbuilt a flamer on it, so Bad Breath has been ticked off the list and it's all been nicely orkified, and there's those lentils for the big rivet work. I now need to start concentrating on the upper section and getting some arms done. Now I have decided against using this for the main part of the kaboom. This is going to be an extra, this is going to be a secondary kaboom, and I will probably add a couple of them together and stick them out on another arm. For the big kaboom, we want a barrel size, something like this, so I am going to be making the main gun out of PVC pipe. So there will be two arms on one side, there's going to be one on the other. On occasion, Stompers and Titans and things like that in general do have a close combat weapon, so I'm going to be putting a wrecking ball and chain on one side, and because of the time period that I grew up in, we need large shoulder pads, so I'm probably going to have a fighting platform on there as well. I will start getting on with those. I actually had a reasonable layoff between this part in the video and the last part, because I got, well, the modeller's equivalent of writer's block. Is it modeller's block? I don't know. And I just could not work out where I was going next. Possibly a lack of confidence on my part, because scratch building, it's not my biggest thing. So there was an awful lot of things that I still had to try and work out, and I wasn't sure how to do it, and there was confidence and things like that. But my supervisor did step in and took over the oversight of the project and said, sort your life out, as you can see. So I have made some headway. First of all, just a little bit of an addition. We've got some hinges and we've got an opening mechanism for the back of the skull. So that is all done. Next thing, we have the fighting platform constructed. Now, I did this in exactly the same way that I did some of the sci-fi flooring tiles. I'll leave a link for that particular video just up top there if you want to check that out. But that is done and ready to be attached. The main kaboom has been done. I've used the back of an old cannon, put an extremely large barrel on it and reinforced it. And that will be going back on its old carriage, but I need to cut that down essentially just so that I have sort of like an elbow joint. So that needs to be done. The third arm, the slightly smaller kaboom, I've added a bazooka onto that recoilless rifle, whatever it is, to give more kaboom there, and used one of the old inhaler canisters, and I've just cut a little bit off, and that will slot in there again as an elbow joint. For the close combat arm, this was the digger arm of an old smashed up toy, and I've repurposed that, put a few more hinges on, put some riveting on, and that is the wrecking ball. Now that's one of those DIY Christmas ornament baubles, and again, just to get some knobbly bits on there, we've got those lentils, and that will get a special paint job, and I'll show you how to do that quite shortly, because I want that to look a little bit more like wrought iron rather than sort of steel plate. And I've got some chain there to connect the two. The big problem that I was having was shoulders. I could not work out how to get the shoulder and upper arm part done, and suddenly I had inspiration. Remember that paper pouring cup? Well, that is going to be the shoulder for our close combat arm. It'll be underslung there, and that can all be prettied up. I knew I would find a use for that. But the next thing that needs to be done, and this is a new thing with GW since I was playing, these were riot shields that came in with those toys, and I will put those on the front like that. And because they've got hatches, then it can have nipple guns, because GW are into nipple guns, as you will see from this photo. I don't know whether or not somebody had just been rewatching Elvira and that's snuck into their miniatures. So now that I am back in flow, I will get on with getting all of this assembled and built up. And now things are starting to look more like they're coming together. Fighting platform has been attached. Here's a picture of how I did it. From the inside, I've put in a couple of small nails. I just heated them up, pushed them through the side of that plastic cup, and used those as anchor points, because the other end of the nail will sort of slide up those tubes that are in the inside of Corflute. So that's good. So that's anchored it from the top, and there is sort of packing foam, the plasticky sort of squishy kind, that's been made up, and that's sort of bracing it from the bottom. So that is nice and stable. However, I did hit a problem, as you can see, somewhere along the line, probably because I cut the lip off that cup. It became a bit squidgy and it has deformed. And I'll just take the top off here, the head rather. There are gaps and it's not fitting properly. It's sort of squidged in at the sides and fattened out at the front and back. So I could just plate over the top, but I do want a bit more of a stable join. Kind of materials that I would normally use for this, I mean, you can just use standard air dry clay, because at the end of the day it's going to be covered over in armour plating, so that would be fine. Stuff like green stuff or milliput, that would go on. But for quickness, rather than mess about and let it set, I am going to basically bodge it. Now, this material I used on the decking. You've seen me use this before. It's, I can never pronounce it properly, twill, something like that. It's the kind of thing that, you know, they use for sort of ballerina dresses. And it's patchwork, and it does have a bit of a stretch, and with it being a fabric, it's nice and bendy. And it is also plastic. So what I'm going to do is basically just give it a skirt, and as you can see, it contours quite nicely. Reinforce it with some super glue and baking soda, and that will cover up those gaps, and then I will just carry on and get the rest of the armour plating and the gribblies done on this. Pop some paper down because it is time for some texture paint. Now what we are going to do is, on some of these areas, like the big sort of smooth roundy bits, and on there, we are going to turn it into sort of a wrought iron, and it'll also hide the joins in that bauble. Now for that, and this is an experiment, I will be perfectly honest, I am using some of my normal Reeves coarse texture gel, and this is just bog standard craft acrylic paint. Doing it about half and half. I've certainly seen people do this with far more expensive stuff, things like modelling putties and things like that, but because I had these on hand, I thought I'd give it a go with this. Alright, that's looking nicely mixed through. And I've just got basically an old brush, and all I'm going to do is stipple it on. And then once that's dried, basically what happens is you just give it a very light sanding, just to take sort of like the spiky bits and the sort of brush areas off it, and it should look nicely like wrought iron. Or at least that's the plan. So the error has been patched over. It is now fully clad and assembled, and my first impressions are that the 80s have cooled and they want their shoulder pads back. Not a great deal of assembly left to do. It's basically just going to be adding gribbly bits in a little bit more detail. But one thing I did want to point out to you, I've already started attaching cables, And it's these little bits here. Now these, and Bill will love these, are beads. They're just little flat polymer clay ones, but when you pop them on the end of a piece of wire, it sort of just finishes that joint, makes it look like a sort of big industrial grommet. So I will get on with those, and the next part should be, well, the undercoat to bring it all together. And here it is all assembled. And we've given it an undercoat. And then there's a top coat of brown, because it's going to be pretty rusty. I'm not going to do any of the painting on video. I'll do a quick photo montage just to show that yes, it was progressing and things like that. And it's around about this time where the other creators would be doing a backstory for their piece. But let's face it, I mean, I've been lucky enough to be able to take what is a relatively well-known game piece, glue two pudding pots together, and then highly decorate it. There's no real story that I can come up with. And it's got to be said, while I was busy sort of at this painting stage and seeing it all come together, my hat goes off to those other creators that I've seen in the Big Bot Bash, and how they can take something and just sort of run with an idea and come up with absolutely awesome pieces. This one for me has been, you know, really stretching my abilities. However, even though the paint job is complete, there is still one more thing to tick off our item list. We've got to get it leaking. Right, we are in the very closing stages, and I've got the safety gloves on, and I have moved over to the wife's workbench, because even though I am a complete novice at this, we are going to do some resin stuff. Now, what I want to do is just pop basically some, well, eyeballs, windscreen, and these are basically just excess drops of resin that landed on the workbench, and I've hoovered them up, and you know, they've come out as pretty much perfect circles, and that is what I am going to do. Use them as the windscreens. Now I just want a really small amount of UV resin. Drop it in there. Looks like a bubble. Pop that. Drop that in place. And then give it a blast. Then for the very last piece, I've just got a sliver of old blue UV resin, and I'm going to pop it in there and nuke it to hold it, so we've got a pilot light. Alright, I'll give that a proper blast with the big UV lamp now that everything's held in place, and we'll get onto the main body. And we are now onto the very last part of the model. It's that category, is it supposed to be leaking? And I had this in mind. I'm going to mix up some UV resin, and we'll see if we can get a nice oily colour. So, a bit of that. Now, the trick, as I've said before, with UV resin is to make sure that you don't get the colour on it too dark, otherwise it's not going to cure. So we're going to go for a sort of new translucent, hopefully oily colour. I'll get a couple of drops of yellow in there, and this is coffee, kind of a dark brown, and I want to go really sparing on this. Oh, that might have been a bit too much. I might need to add some more resin. Give that a mix through, see what it comes out like. Certainly looks dark in there. What's the colour? Now, I am going to add a bit more resin just to dilute that down, or I might have to make another batch. That should hopefully be translucent enough to cure. Now, it's been very difficult to get a decent camera angle on this, but what I have done is loaded a pipette with that oily stuff, and I am just going to select an area and let it dribble, and then nuke it. Might have been a wee bit too much, but that is giving a lovely glossy sort of oily leaky thing, so I will carry on with that and then you'll see the finished product with some glamour shots. And here's the final glamour shot. And of course an obligatory action shot, basically just to show the scale of the damn thing. So let's just double check to make sure that everything is ticked off the list. Has it got bad breath with that flamethrower? Yes it does. Is it a killing machine? Obviously it's a big Ork Stompa. Has it got kaboom? It's got loads of kaboom. It's got really big kaboom. And in terms of extras, it's got extra kaboom on that extra gun arm, and it's got extras in terms of another weapon type, and it's got extra big shoulder pads and an extra fighting platform if you want to load it up with Ork boys. What else was on the list? Oh yeah, it is supposed to be leaking, and even though they aren't a centerpiece of the model, yes, it's tracked. So that's it, build finished finally. Bill reckoned it would take about 2 months and he was pretty much spot on. I think it was about 2 or 3 days under 2 months for me. Although it's got to be said, there was sort of like artistic block and stress and having to take time to work out how to do certain things. Those shoulders, oh my god. But this has been, at the end of it, an enjoyable build. It certainly stretched my talents. How scratch builders do this sort of day in, day out is beyond me. I think I'll have to go back to some terrain just to, you know, calm myself down. But at the end of the day, I do have a lovely playable piece, and it's what, probably the biggest point value single piece that I've got for any of the Warhammer 40k collections. So it has certainly been time well spent, and it is something that I have been thinking about doing for an awful long time. Thank you very much, Bill, for giving me the impetus to actually get something like this done. Anyway, that is about it for me. If you have enjoyed this mega epic, please do hit the like and subscribe, get notifications. Please do check Bill's channel, which is linked down in the description below. And until next time, I'll see you guys in a bit. Toodle pip.